think we're free now. We're free.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Cancers and Aries and Geminis and Donner and Blitzen. Not that any of the latter preclude anyone from being the former, but welcome tonight. Welcome to Soul Food Coffee House. It is December 2nd of 2015. This is the first Wednesday of the month. And as per usual, we have Rick Levine here to present this month's astrological forecast. So let's give it up for Rick.
Welcome to Astrology Night at Soul Food Books here in Redmond, Washington. For those of you who are watching on the internet, you can't imagine how much fun it is to be here. Then again, neither can I. Have a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into the month. And as always, it's an interesting month. We'll get there in a minute. I would like to just start off and share a couple of things, some news. How many people know of the Mountain Astrologer? The Mountain Astrologer is to the astrology world what the Rolling Stone is to the music world. And this month, they have the cover feature articles are 2016, the next 5 years, technology, culture, and planetary cycles. And it features my article on the Jupiter-Uranus cycle and its relationship to technology, featuring Elon Musk and Nikola Tesla's charts. So so go out and buy your copy if you haven't. Secondly, I would like to just mention the upcoming Astrologer conference. This is a totally new kind of conference. This is on March 18th through 20th outside of Atlanta, Georgia, in Athens, Georgia. That's Georgia, not Greece. And this conference is primarily, specifically, for people who are interested or courting the idea of becoming a professional astrologer. And so it's a program to help aspiring astrologers and professionals build their business and to learn more about astrology. I will be one of the key presenters there. And if you want more information, this is sponsored by OPA, the Organization for Professional Astrology, OPA. And if you Google OPA, O-P-A, astrology, you'll come up to their website and information on the Astrologer retreat/conference in March 18th of 2016. And the third and final thing that I would like to mention is the annual Brighton Bush Hot Springs retreat. And if you bear with me here, I just want to spend a couple of minutes. How many people here have been to Brighton Bush ever? A handful of you? Okay. So Brighton Bush is one of the Northwest's gems that, whether you make it to this weekend or not, it's certainly worth going to. It's located in the old-growth forest about an hour outside east of Salem, Oregon, which is about an hour south of Portland, Oregon. For those people on the internet, you can easily fly into Portland and rent a car or check out ride shares from Portland up to Brighton Bush. So the Brighton Bush Hot Springs every year has an astrology retreat the first weekend in January after the holidays. Jeff Jower and I co-facilitated 8 of these. Last year, I did it alone, and this year I will be also. This is Conscious Creation with Astrology. It's the 10th annual New Year's Astrology Conference. This year, it's January 8th through 10th, 2016. And basically, the flow of the weekend is this. You arrive Friday afternoon or evening for dinner. And on Friday evening after dinner, I present an overview of 2016, kind of like I present the overview for each month here at Soul Food. It's the same format on the Friday night, except it's an overview for the entire year. And we look at the outer planet aspects and the major considerations of the planetary cycles for the upcoming year 2016. And then on Saturday and Sunday, we plow through the charts of all the participants. So this is like the second part of the Soul Food evenings, where we draw 3 names out of a hat, or off the table when we don't have a hat. But in this, everyone who attends has their moment in the sun with their chart. And again, these charts are both for the individual's benefit and for a teaching process, where we'll be looking at the major natal patterns in the charts and the significant transits of 2016. And that basically creates the weekend. Usually the group is it's about 20 to 25 people. And seeing everyone's charts over the course of 2 days really teaches you a lot about astrology, and it helps allow the group to get to know each other pretty quickly. These are just some pictures of of Brighton Bush, the main lodge. It can be snowy in January, but I would say 2 out of 3 years it's not. 1 out of 3 years it's rainy. 1 out of 3 years it's clear. But the snow up there is very magical and beautiful. This is the main office. There are cabins, the retreat facility houses, I think probably somewhere around a couple of hundred people at full facility. There's usually a few events going on at the same time. The cabins are all geothermally heated because the entire camp, the entire property, is on a geothermal active area, which means that you can have the doors and windows of your cabin wide open and the heat cranked up, and you're not wasting any energy. The water's just flowing through your radiators. Also, there are the proverbial world-class hot tubs, both unimproved ones out in the woods and out in the meadow, and then these tiled ones. The hot tubs are totally magical. They mix the water from the Brighton Bush River, which is also their source of electricity. The place is off the grid. No internet, no cell phone coverage. I don't care who your provider is. You're basically, from Friday to Sunday, you're off the grid. But the hot tubs are pretty magical, and you can see even when there's snow on the ground, there's green around the areas where the hot water flows. The cost is $140 if you register by December 15th. It will fill up, so if you're considering, I would call and get a place while they're still available. The workshop itself, Friday night, all day Saturday, and Sunday till lunch, is $140. Lodging is separate. And depending upon what options you choose, lodging runs $70 to $110 a night, but that includes 3 all-you-can-eat organic vegetarian meals, and the meals are quite well. If you like Birkenstock food, the meals are amazing. And the high peaks of the mountains around there are pretty magical, and registration is limited. And here's a number to call. I'll have something up on Star IQ and on my Facebook page in the next few days with this phone number. But you can just go to Brightonbush Hot Springs. Brightonbush.com. That's BreitenBush, Brightonbush.com, and get more information there if you click on through to events and schedule. So, sorry to take up so much time on that, but it's December. This will be a month from now, because it's the first week of January. Can you believe we're in December already? Is this like crazy? It is to me. I'm still getting used to the fact that the 19s are gone. We're in the 2000s. It's like, I don't know. By the way, I do have a couple of Brighton Bush Hot Springs catalogs here. I'll leave them up here if you're interested. Those are the only 2 I have left, and if you're interested, please take one. And like I said, even if you don't make it to the weekend, astrology weekend, it's a magical place to go to. I'll be doing another workshop there midsummer for those of you who can't brave the cold. But part of the cool thing is being in a hot tub with snow around, it's just like pretty magical. And everything is geothermally heated. So you stay warm there. Okay. It's December. Really? Did we have a good Thanksgiving? That's what I thought. It's been rather strange. I mean, normally after a holiday, you say, "Did you have a great holiday?" I go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." It's been tough up there. It's been tough. And I think the good news is that December is a bit easier. There's a few hot spots in December, but all in all, it's not quite as stressful as November was. And even these first few days of December have been pretty stressful. But it does, it's interesting because often when we do astrology night, we focus on the major big aspects coming up for the month ahead. Well, this month there really are none. And that in itself is big news, because have you ever noticed that you work hard all week, and Saturday, you're looking forward to Saturday or Sunday to finally getting a day off, and you wake up and you feel like shit? You get sick on your day off. Well, it's because sometimes our immune system has this ability to suppress symptoms while we don't have time for them. Oh, it reaches a point where they'll come through no matter what. But often we can keep symptoms at abeyance. Is that a right word? At bay. At abeyance? At bay. It's English as a first language. I have trouble with it sometimes. Often we can keep symptoms suppressed. How's that a way of getting around it? But then when we finally have some breathing space, the symptoms just come through like a freight train. Well, the same is true astrologically. Often we have major aspects that don't fully process until we get a little bit of breathing time. And I think that December, to some extent, is a bit of that breathing time. So just because there aren't hugely major aspects, so when I say major aspects, I'm talking about aspects between the slower moving planets, between Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. And this month, the slowest moving aspects we have involve Mars. And so that makes this month qualitatively different, meaning that there still is intensity, but it's not the same type of depth of new issues. Instead, I think we'll be processing some of the issues that we just haven't gotten around to, or have been in denial over, or just simply haven't had time to. So we have up here a chart for this evening. This is December 2nd, 2015. And I know that there are people of all different levels of astrology. There are professionals here and people who probably can't even name the 12 signs. It's okay. You're all cool. But what we're looking at is a map of where the sun at 10 degrees of Sagittarius, the moon right now at 8 degrees of Virgo, Mercury at 19 Sag, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, where's Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So we're looking at where all the planets are with respect to the signs that we locate them in as astrologers. Now, the slowest moving planets spend years, even decades in a sign. For example, Pluto, which is halfway through Capricorn, will be there until the early 2020s. Neptune, which is in Pisces, has about another 10 years before it moves into Aries. So the slower moving planets camp out in signs for a long period of time. The faster moving planets, and we include the sun and the moon and Pluto in the astrological word planets. It's based upon the Greek word planeta, which is just wanderers. Anything that moves in the sky to the Greeks was technically a planet. I know the difference between a satellite and a modern astronomical planet. But the moon whizzes through the zodiac once every month. So that when people say, do you really believe in astrology? Not as many people say that these days. I say, yeah, don't you? And they go, oh, no. I go, so you don't use a calendar? Interesting. Because calendars are astrological. So the moon spends only 2.5, 2.25 days in a sign. And so it whizzes around so quickly, by the time we realize where it is, it's already somewhere else. But what I want to start off talking about is the slow-moving square between revolutionary Uranus and evolutionary Pluto. Revolutions happen quickly, evolution happens slowly. This square between Uranus and Pluto, for those of you who are repeat offenders and come here often or every month, know that Uranus and Pluto joined up from Earth's point of view. They were in line, they were conjunct in the mid-60s, defining what we call the craziness of the 60s. Revolutionary Uranus, the planet of awareness and awakening, lining up with Pluto, the bacchanalian, deep urges planet that's the unconscious that comes into awareness through a form of evolutionary metamorphosis transformation. So Uranus and Pluto lined up in the mid-60s, but from about 2012 to 2015, they moved in and out of 90 degrees to each other. Squares in astrology are conflictive. They're stressed because the planets are going in different directions, if you will. So technically, the Uranus-Pluto square is over. From Earth's point of view, that square was exact 7 times from 2012 through 2015. Technically, it's done. But it ain't done. Just like the conjunction of the mid-60s wasn't really done until, 71 or 72 when the energy started settling down, we can expect this square to dominate our consciousness for at least another 3 or 4 years. What happens is that because these slow-moving planets hold a position, the faster-moving planets come in and out of making angles with them, and when they do, these events are brought back into consciousness. And the reason why I'm talking about this at all, I said earlier that the slowest-moving astrological event that we have this month, December 2015, is the fact that Mars forms a square with Pluto, actually on December 6th, and an opposition with Uranus on December 10th. Now, these are technically 2 separate events, but I'm here to tell you that they're really one event, and that one event is tied to the one event that has occurred from 2010 all the way through 2020, that in 50 years we'll look back at this time and go, oh yeah, that was when, boom, 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 boom. But when you're in the middle of a change, whether it's cultural, social, or personal in a relationship or in your life, when you're in the middle of a change, you experience it as separate events, separate events, separate events, separate events. But when you begin to get distance on it, you begin to see that these separate events are really tied together. Just like the 60s was about a social transformation awakening that didn't quite come to fruition. The 60s, we had issues of gender equality, feminism, Ms. Magazine. We had issues of racial equality, the civil rights movement. We had issues of protest social movements. We had the rise of the modern ecological movement. We had sex, drugs, and rock and roll, 60s. And these same issues have never really, really fully gone away, but they're all back on our plate right now, big time, are they not? And as Mars moves to square Pluto and oppose Uranus, you see, Uranus is the faster moving planet, so it's moving away from the square. It was at 14 degrees, but now it's at 16, and it's moving further and further away. It'll move slowly further and further away. But right now, they're still within a couple of degrees, which astrologically is significant. And into that, over the next few days, I want you to just watch Mars here. And as we move forward, Mars hits 13 degrees, and then it hits, oh, and by the way, on the 4th, when Mars is at 13 degrees, the moon comes sweeping through there too. So we have this square between the moon and Mars squaring to Pluto that's exact. And then over the next couple of days, you can see that Mars then lines up exactly with Uranus. But what it's really doing, it's really stressing this entire series of planetary points here. And so I'm suggesting that over the next week with the events in Paris, I mean, these things don't happen in a moment. They happen both coming and going, kind of like changing seasons, if you will. And so what happens is, what I'm suggesting will happen is that over the next week with the events in Paris, both the horrible assassination, murders, whatever you want to call them, killings, and now the global warming conference and other things that are happening all around the planet, I'm assuming that we will see things heating up today. I don't know if you heard, but today, December 2nd, there was another shooting in San Bernardino, California. And it's really crazy when these things happened at one time, it was an oh my God, and now it's just an uh-huh. You know, it's kind of scary at the pace at which these things are happening. But I do imagine that we will get some stress out of this. And because Mars is in Libra, which is a relationship sign, Uranus is in Aries, which is an I, me, mine sign, there's a sense of on a personal level, we may feel this as a frustration in individual relationships where we're trying to maintain our independence without necessarily nuking or destroying or creating extra stress in a relationship. But I think that we'll feel the stress, and because the square to Pluto is involved, I think that there's some power struggle going on that we will feel in this process. But again, this is a Mars transit. Things can blow up, bad use of that word. Things can heat up. You have to be careful these days with language. It's like when I speak, I hear my editor in the background, who, for my daily column says, can't use that word, can't use that word. I have a list of words I'm not allowed to use. No, it's good. Because language is important. I mean, how we speak, what we say is way more important than we realize. The key word here would be architectonic. The movement of language and the vibrations actually is the first cause. In fact, going back to the Bible, in the beginning there was the Word, and it's a bad translation, but the word really comes from the word logos, and logos isn't just logic, it's the logical connection between the metaphysical and the physical. And so it's the mutual arising of reality when the proper vibration is sounded that manifests what's there. Boy, was that a tangent or what? Anyhow, it was a good tangent. I am the king of tangents. However, I don't do as well with cosines. It's a math joke. All right, so this Mars thing is very significant, and it really does flavor this month. And incidentally, we will look at the faster-moving planets as they move through the signs, and they won't actually begin hitting until the end of the month and next month, January 2016. But by contract, they'll dock my pay if I talk about January. Does that mean I get paid? That would be cool. No, but in January, we will be talking about how some of these faster-moving planets, including Mercury and then the Sun, move across into Capricorn, line up with Pluto and square Uranus. And so we're not done with this energy. That's my main point, that it's nothing new. This isn't about new issues, new stuff, but the old stresses that are not resolved are going to be in our face again. And again, and again. It ain't over. All right, let's come back to now. We also have another interesting development occurring here, and that is we have a bunch of planets in Sagittarius. You know, often the Sun and Mercury and Venus and Mars often cluster very close together in the sky. Right now, they're about as far apart as they ever get, which is really interesting. So there's a larger spread. And normally I can get away with, on Astrology Night, just talking about the sun sign. The sun is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the sign of freedom. That's the sign of independence. It's foreigners traveling to a new country. It's the high road of fellowship over nationality. It's Thanksgiving. It's also the shadows that we tend not to look at while we're Sagittarians. And so we forget that I got an email from a friend saying, I'm having a traditional Thanksgiving this year. I've invited all my closest friends and relatives. We're going to eat, and then I'm going to kill them and take their land. It would be funnier if it wasn't true, but the Sagittarian energy is uplifting. It's high ideals. And the sun moves at the end of the month from Sagittarius to Capricorn. And before that, we have Mercury making that same move, and Mercury moves into Capricorn on December 9th. Can you see how when I toggle back and forth between the 8th and the 9th, you can see Mercury changing signs from 28 degrees of Capricorn to 28 degrees of Sagittarius to 0 degrees of Capricorn. So what will happen as the month progresses is that the moon sweeps through Capricorn, and then eventually on the 21st, the sun moves into Capricorn. This is the winter solstice, the solstice or solstice. They are both correct. Jeff and I, for years, we would say it differently, and we would argue as to which one was correct, only to realize that we were arguing for the one that was the other person's last year. I mean, you know, solstice, I don't remember which one I even say anymore. But the winter solstice, do we have a reset? Did we already do it? You know, if it's not a video camera, it can only record. Nothing is taped anymore. It can only record for 20 some odd minutes because otherwise the tariff is higher. Tariffs are lower on cameras than on video cameras. And so it's not, if you have any sort of like an iPhone or anything that records video, it's not a technological blockage that prevents it from recording an hour. It's strictly a tariff issue. Who would have thought? So, from Earth's point of view, in the northern latitudes, aside from the sun rising every day and setting every day, the sun rises and sets in different spots. It's higher in the sky in midsummer than it is in midwinter when it clings closer to the horizon. And the winter solstice is the day at which the sun is the lowest, closest to the horizon, the furthest south. And just like a planet going direct and retrograde, just like a pendulum of a clock, in order for it to change directions, it has to stop. Sol, the sun, stitial. It's the stillness. It's the sun not moving, not in its daily motion, but in its yearly motion of its closeness or distance to the horizon. So the winter solstice is the day of least light. It's also the day, astrologically, that the sun moves from Sagittarius, a changeable, season-changing sign, into Capricorn, a cardinal or season-starting sign. Capricorn is an earth sign. Capricorn has to do with the earth that doesn't move. You know that whole expression of you don't want to build your castle on sand? You know, you want to build, you want to climb a mountain that's not going to move. And this is how a Capricorn lives his or her life. There's that sense of climbing the mountain in a stable way so that it gets to the top. The Sagittarian will see the mountain and go, cool, mountain, adventure, and head off toward it. The Sagittarius won't care whether or not it ever reaches the summit. Its whole drive is the motivation of the journey, of the excitement and the learning and the growth of taking the journey. The Capricorn doesn't give a crap about any of that. The Capricorn's about hierarchy. It's about getting to the top. Capricorns are driven. There's a sense of ambition in Capricorn because that whole idea of differentiation by hierarchy. I mean, there's definitely an issue of dominance and submission, and I don't mean necessarily, I was going to say only, but I don't necessarily mean sexual. There's a sense of Capricorn wants to be on top of the mountain, of life, of their career. They're driven to do what they need to do to be the king of the mountain, so to speak. However, it's important to understand that the issue of the sun moving from Sagittarius to Capricorn on the solstice on the 21st is not quite as significant this year because there aren't so many planets clustered around the sun. As such, we also just want to note that Venus is in Scorpio, and Venus is in Scorpio until the 29th of December. So Venus is in Scorpio. Venus moves into Scorpio in 2 days. Let's come back to now. Be here now. The power of now. Now is all there is. It's Rick's theory of the overinflated importance of the present moment. Chew on that one. The overinflated importance of the present moment. Okay, so here we are back in the present. Here we are back in the present moment. We have Venus at 27 degrees of Libra. Mars and Venus have both been in Libra. Libra is a relationship sign. Not only individual, personal, romantic, and or business relationships, but all relationships. The relationships between ideas, relationships between other people, between political positions. And as Venus moves into Scorpio on the 4th, the energy changes a bit because Venus was at home in Libra and is very comfortable with this kind of putting things in balance in relationship. But when Venus enters Scorpio, things get intense. Now, we will have Mars going into Scorpio later on, not until next month, and Mars will do this forever thing in Scorpio because it makes Mars retrogrades in Scorpio next year. So it'll spend a lot of time through 2016 back in Scorpio. Again, we're not talking about that tonight. But Venus moving into Scorpio says that what we like, Venus, what we love or who we love, Venus, what we're attracted to, Venus, our sense of what we value, our own values, Venus, in Libra are seeking balance, seeking harmony. In Libra, that's the peacemaker. Libra wants to make everything nice. Scorpio doesn't give a crap about nice. Scorpio wants a position, a point of view, and it will hold that point of view with passion and with power. Venus in Scorpio is about passion. It's about intense emotion. Venus in Scorpio is probably the most intensely passionate, jealous, envious, and can be destructive. It's one of the harder positions to manage, and yet the rewards are the most awesome when one can overcome the ego's fear that creates negative feelings like jealousy or possession. But Scorpio has that energy that it wants to hold, it wants to pull in. It wants to merge, and Venus in Scorpio is not interested in creating, it's not interested in dancing with a partner. That would be Venus in Libra. It wants to be one with the partner. And there's a qualitative, not just quantitative difference of how close one is to a loved one or object of one's love when one is close to it versus at one with it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Venus in Scorpio doesn't want to be close. It wants to be at one with. But this does raise issues because as we get closer to someone or something that we love, we also have our own issues, the ego's issues of fear of loss of identity, the ego death, the medieval concept of orgasm being a little death. There's that idea of losing one's position when Venus is in Scorpio. So it's an interesting dance, and Venus remains in Scorpio all month. That is until the 29th. When she moves into Sagittarius. And again, we will feel in December when we talk, in January, when we're back here talking about the January of 2017, we'll realize how lighter the energy feels with Venus attracting us to things that, again, have to do with the high road, the high ideal. We're no longer interested in merging. We're interested in philosophizing about it. So, Back to now for just a moment, and we want to take a look at the sun, which is still in Sagittarius until the solstice on the 21st. But while the sun is in fiery Sagittarius for a month, Mercury is in Sagittarius just for a couple of weeks, and in fact, Mercury moves into Capricorn on the 9th. Mercury moves from Sagittarius into Capricorn on the 9th. But for a little bit of time right now at the beginning of December, we have the Sun and Saturn and Mercury in Sagittarius. Remember, Saturn's a slower moving planet. Saturn stays in Sagittarius for a couple of years. So all of you Sagittarians might be feeling at some time during this process the weight of Saturn lining up with your sun and feeling more responsible, feeling heavier, feeling like you need to make decisions or take points of view or hold positions that you have to fight for in some way. But we have the sun in Sagittarius right now moving into a trine with Uranus for a few days, and this will be exact on the 8th. But I imagine we're already feeling it, that over the last several days, going back to the very end of November and around Thanksgiving, and this is one of the reasons why Thanksgiving was so tough, was that during that week, we had the sun lining up with Saturn, and actually, if we back it up even further toward Thanksgiving, Mercury and the sun were all clustered together. And Saturn is heavy. Saturn is boundaries. Saturn is the taskmaster. We have to work harder at stuff than we want to when Saturn is present. And so we're feeling a little bit of freedom as the sun is now moving away from Sagittarius, as the sun is moving away from Saturn in Sagittarius. And as the sun does, it gets closer and closer to forming this harmonious trine. That's these blue lines here from Sagittarius, fire sign Sagittarius, to Uranus, fire sign Aries. And this energy continues to build through, December. Through the 8th, 9th, 10th. That period of time is when the sun is exactly trine to Uranus. And what that means is that it's easier to express ourselves as we want to rather than as we have to. I think of Ram Dass saying, "I've been should upon long enough." It's like instead of feeling the shoulds, we're able to make the changes to express who we are individually, and somehow for a few days it's more likely that however crazy we might be, however crazy we are, however much we're looking at pushing the boundaries, for a couple of few days, we have a better chance of getting away with it. Except nothing happens in a vacuum. And remember, we still have Mars opposing Uranus and squaring Pluto during the same period of time. So on one hand, we're encouraged to push the envelope, to step further, to do weird stuff, to do things that are individualistic and maybe even selfish rather than altruistic and for the other person. We're inclined to do that, but there's still a backlash. By the 11th, you can see as we move this, watch the moon getting closer to the sun. The moon is now, by the 9th, it's the day that Mercury moves into Capricorn and the sun trines Uranus. We have the moon moving into Sagittarius. It lines up with, let me switch this to going an hour at a time instead of a day at a time. And watch that moon move closer and closer and closer, first to Saturn. This is on the 10th. And the moon lines up with Saturn. It's a bit of serious emotions. We run into an obstacle. We feel the weight again. And then we get closer and closer to the new moon and watch that moon coming in closer and closer and closer until it's at the same degree as the sun, and then it jumps to the other side of the sun. Can you see that? So the new moon in Sagittarius is at 2:29 a.m. That's Pacific time, so it's late on the night of the 10th or very early in the morning on the morning of December 11th. That would be a Friday morning. And the new moon is always a seed period. This seed in Sagittarius is the seed of the great adventure. Remember, Sagittarius looks out and sees the blue, empty sky. It's the airline pilot that goes long distances. It's the philosopher that thinks big thoughts unencumbered by reality. Little things like reality. The new moon in Sagittarius is expansive. It is also still harmoniously trine Uranus. So there's that sense of this new moon, I think, is a really positive one. I think that we have the craziness and the breakthrough energy still of Mars opposite Uranus, but I think that we can plant the seed. We can plant the seed of intention for those ways in which we want to express our true nature, although it may not happen all right at once. And if it does happen all right at once, we may end up having to, I don't want to say pay a price, but that Mars opposite Uranus says that there could be some backlash because we're motivated to do things too much or too far in a way. This new moon is very significant because it sets the tone for the rest of the year. The full moon is on Christmas Day, and that is the culmination. It's interesting, I can't remember having a full moon on Christmas Day, but it's actually very early in the morning, so technically it's on Christmas Eve. So we'll have a pretty magical moon if we could just get rid of those damn clouds that don't dissipate in Seattle until July. All right, let's see. Where are we? What do we got to cover? December 10th also, and around the new moon, this is part of it. We also have Venus forming a trine with Neptune. Venus, remember, we talked about her in Scorpio. There's an intensity, a passion. But Neptune is the planet of fantasy and dreams. If you wanted to plan a hot date, this might be a night to do it because Venus trine Neptune, there's a smooth flow of energy from one's desires into the realms of dreams, imagination, fantasy, etc. Do you want my phone number? No. I didn't say that. The actual, it's around the new moon. The new moon is 2:29 a.m. On Friday, December 11th. So we're talking that Friday night. The actual Venus trine Neptune is exact at 10:13 on let's see, this would be on Thursday. Hold on one second. 0 a.m. it would be, it actually would be technically Thursday night, early Friday morning. So for those of you who have to be in school on Friday morning, or work, tough. But the actual Venus trine is exact on December 10th at 10:13 p.m. But these planetary, aside from the moon's, aspects, which really, except for the new moon and full moon, really only last for a few hours, that Venus trine Neptune will feel for a couple of days before and a day after. And it's a time of sweet fantasy, illusion. I mean, even going to a movie or getting lost in a book, these are things that allow the imagination to go. It doesn't have to be relationship or sexually, or romantically oriented. During this period of time, though, we're also likely to be pushing things towards extremes. Why? Because the sun in Sagittarius is moving closer and closer and closer to an exact square. The sun moves about a degree a day. So 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, we're about 4 days away from the sun being exactly square Jupiter. I'm going to move this forward so we can see that. Oh, we got to take it off the hour. Wait, hold on 1 second here. Go back to noon. Go back to making this go a day at a time. And there is the sun on December 14th, exactly square to Jupiter. Now, all the planets put together just make a minuscule part of the size and volume of the sun. But all the other planets put together don't equal Jupiter. Jupiter and the sun are the two most massive things in our little local system, solar system. In fact, although we think of Jupiter as the largest of the planets, it actually might be the smallest of the nearby stars. Jupiter actually emits more radiation than it receives, unlike the other planets. The other planets all reflect the light of the sun. Jupiter actually emits radio waves. And it's likely that Jupiter was a failed sun. It didn't quite reach that mass that's needed for it to go into burn mode. But when the two largest objects in our solar system make a 90-degree angle, when they are square, this is maximum conflict and stress. The traditional astrology, classical astrology, basically says squares, no good, trines, good. I'm oversimplifying. But squares are tough. They're harder to handle because there's conflict and there's stress. But this is stress between the ultimate source of light, the sun, and the planet of bigger, better, and more. What could be wrong with stress between light and too much? Well, it's Mae West's old line, too much of a good thing is a good thing. And it may not be. Because when Jupiter squares the sun, we can end up overindulging. We can end up taking things too far, pushing limits too far, overeating, overdrinking, overexpressing, driving too fast. Whatever it is, Jupiter square the sun says whatever those boundaries were, if it feels good, make it more, make it bigger, and push beyond. So this is also the energy around this new moon and even around that Venus trine Neptune that, from the 10th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, we need to pay attention and we can watch again. I always watch, the headlines and what's going on in the world, globally, politically, because again, there may be the rhetoric may be, I was going to say amped up, but how could that possibly be? But we'll watch. We'll see. The next event I want to stop on is on the 19th. And we have Mercury now moving through Capricorn. And you can see, here's Mercury and Pluto. Remember, Pluto moves very slowly. Mercury is like a mosquito as to how fast it moves compared to Pluto, which is like a hunk of granite. So we have Mercury catching up with Pluto. And you can see that on the 19th, it catches up and surpasses Pluto. And then over the next couple of days, Mercury squares Uranus. Now, Mars is still not completely out of the picture. Remember, we talked about the Mars square Pluto and opposed Uranus, which were back on December 6th and 10th. But here we are now around the solstice on the 21st, and we have Mercury lining up on the 17th, 18th, 19th with Pluto and then squaring Uranus, and then Mercury makes a square to Mars on the 27th. Actually, Mercury square Mars is really not until the 28th, 29th. So this whole period of time, the tension again is high. And this time with Mercury involved, going back to Mercury and Pluto, Mercury lining up with Pluto on the 19th, Pluto is the lord of the underworld. It's the hell realms. It's the unconscious. Mercury was sent into the hell realms by Jupiter to rescue Persephone, who is abducted by Pluto or Hades. Read your mythology. Mercury is communication. Mercury is talk therapy. You see, Pluto is the unconscious. The underworld is everything that's hidden. It's everything that is not here. So anything that is suppressed or repressed is Plutonic. Mercury, who could go back and forth across the river Styx. If anyone else's phone rings, I'm going to answer it, so you don't want that to happen, unless it was a patient. So Mercury's job, as assigned by Jupiter, was to go into the hell realms to recover the abducted Persephone. And by the same token, when Mercury lines up with Pluto back on the 19th, we got to get back there, 19th, 19th. When Mercury lines up with Pluto, this is a time to send our thoughts, to send rational logic into the hidden realms, and to use the mind and to shine the light of awareness, of consciousness, into those places that are dark, because in the dark, things have more power than they do in the light. When you're frightened of something and you don't know what it is, it has power over you. If you know what it is, you can make a strategy, you can engage it. So this conjunction of Mercury to Pluto on the 18th, 19th, 20th is basically a chance to go into the underworld and recover some of those things which have been suppressed or buried or hidden. And then over the next couple of days, as the Mercury forms the square to Uranus, which is exact on the 20th, now we're getting dangerously close to the solstice and to Christmas, but this is about explosive communication because, you know, I said earlier that Pluto is about slow, gradual metamorphosis, evolutionary transformation. Uranus is lightning striking. It's the suddenness of a revolution changing everything. And so when Mercury squares Uranus on the 20th, we may actually say things that we can't retract, and they have ramifications. Or we may learn things, but it's about communication, and it's about stuff that is brought into awareness, into the light. On the 21st, the sun moves into Capricorn. That's the solstice. We talked about that. It's the day of shortest light, or the least amount of daylight hours in the northern hemisphere. And, of course, our friends in New Zealand are getting their midsummer right now, and that would be their summer solstice. Do you notice I said solstice and before I said solstice? I don't know which one I say. It's like saying, if you slice the tomato, I'll have a tomato sandwich. Go figure. On Christmas Eve day, we're back to Venus coming into the picture. And we have an interesting scenario developing that doesn't last long, but it's actually quite sweet. And that is that Mercury in Capricorn harmonizes with Jupiter, and Venus comes through the middle, making this little blue triangle, which is basically sweet. It's nice. We're going to back this up just a little bit so that we can see that the Venus coming back here, Venus exactly sextiling Pluto on the 17th, 18th, 17th. And then Mercury moves into the picture. Mercury sextiles Venus, while Venus is sextiling Jupiter. And on top of that, on the 25th, on Christmas Day itself, we have Mercury forming an exact trine with Jupiter. It doesn't get any better than this, he says as he waits for the camera to reset. It doesn't get any better than this. Oh, except we never get one thing without getting another. And so we'll come back to the other here in just a moment. But the fact is that on Christmas Day, we do have Venus making that sextile with Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter, in the ancient astrology tradition, they're called the benefics. Saturn and Mars were called the malefics. It really, to the ancients, Saturn and Mars were bad, Venus and Jupiter were good. We moderners say Venus and Jupiter are easier to work with and easier to express without working at it. Mars and Saturn are tougher to master. They're harder energies to work with. So we have ostensibly the nicest planet, Venus, harmonizing in a supportive manner with the best planet, Jupiter. Jupiter is propitious. It's auspicious. It's wonderful. Remember, Jupiter is a good thing. And when Venus forms this sextile with Jupiter on the 24th, that's a good thing, especially because Mercury, right behind it and at the same time, forms a harmonizing trine with Jupiter. And so we can expect things to be rather pleasant during this time. There's that sense of everything's going to be okay, it's all going to work out, and yet we may find ourselves a week later realizing, oh crap, we mortgaged the house to buy the extra Nintendos for all the kids we didn't know. Are there still Nintendos? But the idea here is that we can overcommit, we can overpromise, we can overspend, we can overindulge. And unlike the square that we talked about earlier, where we know it right away, here it feels good while we're doing it. And we don't know it, but when we look back at it, we may realize that we still went too much. And so I hate to be the Saturnian, cautionary, be careful, be careful, be careful, because this really is a great time to have a good time. And yet, we want to just keep in mind that we can have such a good time, we can forget about what limits and boundaries actually are. Also, on Christmas Day, as I mentioned earlier, we have, and we're going to go back here to an hour at a time so we can pull this back to, let's, come on, to the full moon, and the full moon is on at 3:11 a.m. That's Pacific time, so 6:11 a.m. Eastern time, and that is on Christmas Day. It is December 25th, and that same day is the day that Mercury trines Jupiter. So this is a pretty magical full moon. And the moon itself in Cancer denotes home, family, protection. The Cancer is the sign of the crab that has the hard outer shell because inside it's mush, no backbone. And yet it's a good strategy. And so when the moon is in Cancer, especially a full moon, there's that sense around the Christmas holidays, regardless of what you celebrate or don't celebrate, it's that week, that day at the full moon, there's a sense of creating this hard outer shell, the Capricorn structure, the mountain, and feeling safe and at home with your family. This is actually very different than the Thanksgiving. I would guess, and when we come back for the January, I would like to hear some stories, because I would guess that you could get together with the same family that you got together with on Thanksgiving that you wanted to kill, or that wanted to kill you. And I mean that metaphorically, not really. Well, never mind. But that the same group of people who got together on Thanksgiving, that may have been difficult because Saturn was conjuncting the Sun and Mercury was conjuncting Saturn. Saturn, Mercury, Sun. Saturn, Mercury, Saturn, Sun. And so there was this sense of heaviness, of responsibility. But on Christmas, we don't have that. Saturn is, if anything, beginning to dance a dance that it will dance through January that's kind of experimenting with opening up boundaries. But on top of that, we have all this sweet stuff with Jupiter, between Venus and Jupiter and Mercury and Jupiter. And so I think that the same group of people that we didn't ever want to be with again after Thanksgiving was over, by Christmas it'll be wonderful. It'll work. So I'll be interested in hearing your stories, but that full moon takes us toward the end of the month, with the exception that on the 25th also, Uranus turns direct. You know, I don't often talk about outer planets retrograde direct because they move so slowly. They do have cause and effect, but it's the faster moving planets like Mercury, Venus, and Mars that when they turn retrograde or direct, I think have the most noticeable impact. But Uranus turning direct on Christmas is just another notice of the energy of things moving forward and us maybe getting out of the funk that we've all been in. On the 29th, Mercury squares Mars. Now, this is New Year's Eve Eve. Is that right? New Year's Eve Eve Eve. The 30th, 31st. Yeah, it's the eve to New Year's Eve. Or something like that. On the 29th, Mercury squares Mars. Watch temper here, because Mars is hot, Mars is the warrior, Mercury is the intellect, Mercury is our thinking, and we may get into an argument with someone about something that really isn't important in the long run, but it's almost like we need a target to burn the energy off, to express it, and to blow things up out of proportion. So watch ego skirmishes, battles, moving in toward New Year's Eve. Later that night on the 29th and moving on into the 30th, Venus moves into Sagittarius, as I had said earlier. And let's go back here to a day at a time. And we have Venus here in Scorpio moving into Sagittarius on the 29th. And again, this is like the vistas opening. There is a little bit of a problem here. We'll talk more about this next month. But normally when Venus moves into Sagittarius, the clouds clear, we can see the horizon, we know what we want way out in the distance. The problem is that over the first weeks of 2016, that Venus will run into Saturn, which is a bit of a wall. And that's a separate issue, but I think that we'll still feel relief, and I think that we'll be ready to party on New Year's Eve. That's it, another month. Before we break, two orders of business. First, we need to sing happy birthday to Ruben. He's 21 years old again. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear Ruben. Happy birthday to you.
It's my job to embarrass people, I know. And secondly, before we break, I do want to thank Soul Food and the baristas. Who's back there? Alexi? Jackie? Alexis. Jackie. Makia. And Kevin are all floating around. Thank you guys for creating this magical space for us, for the community. Remember, you can exercise. It's like casting a vote economically. Buy your gifts here and support this place. We don't charge for Astrology Night. And so to keep this going, keep this place open, there's wonderful books and toys and Christmas gifts. Buy something tonight that you weren't planning on, and you won't have to go to some big nameless department store to get it next month. Last order of business, if you want your chart looked at, we'll take a 10 or 15, about a 15-minute break. We'll come back and we'll look at 3 charts. And if you want your chart to be in the hopper, we'll draw 3. Put your name, your birth date, time of day, the place you were born, birth date, time, and place, and your email address if you want to be on my mailing list, on a piece of paper. Your name, birth date, time, and place, and put it on the table where Julie's butt is now, but won't be when you're actually putting it there. Thank you all again for coming. Hope to see you next month, and I hope to see some of your faces in Brightonbush. We're going to have fun. It's going to be a blast. And I will be here before Brightonbush, but it'll be too late to register. It will definitely be too late to register. Thank you all. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and all of that stuff. I did. Yeah. I thought of saying it during the lecture a few times, but I didn't want to. It's okay. Thanks.